We are right at 5:30. I will call tonight's EDA meeting to order. And Abby, could we have a roll call, please?
Commissioner Larson.
Here.
Commissioner Langness.
Present.
Commissioner Grindal.
Present.
Commissioner Husnick.
Here.
Commissioner Lorge.
Here.
Commissioner Hoyt.
Here.
President Bain.
Here. I'd like to invite everyone to rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Members of the EDA, we have an agenda before you. I would like to propose one minor modification to the agenda, and that would be to add an open forum just right after we approve the agenda. And so that would be my motion that the EDA approve the amended agenda. Is there a second, or also happy to entertain any other changes?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose, and our agenda is approved. Our next item this evening is open forum. Open forum is any interested party's opportunity to address the EDA on any topic of their choosing. And is there anybody that would like to speak in open forum this evening?
I will hold until council.
Okay, very good. Not having anyone else come forward, we will close open forum and bring the agenda back to the EDA. Next item is to approve our minutes from our regular meeting on June 10th.
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We'll take a second from Member Larson. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose, and motion carries. Our next item this evening is to consider the 280 Broadway Avenue West contract for real estate purchase and private development. And Abby.
Thank you, President Bain, members of the EDA. Since 2021, the council is aware the city staff has been in discussions with GLG Forest Lake Properties, LLC, about the rehabilitation and revitalization of the Hoole elevator site and adjacent undeveloped properties around it. Along with the adaptive reuse of the elevator for retail purposes, the redevelopment plans of the site include a second phase, which would accommodate a retail greenhouse outside nursery area and associated pedestrian and parking improvements. Once completed, the block will have an urban standard. To accomplish the full build-out of the site, GLG Forest Lake Properties has submitted an offer letter to the city to purchase 280 Broadway Avenue West for $70,000. I included in my staff report applicable background there for the EDA. You've been briefed on this history in a number of closed sessions that we've been talking about the development of this property. I wanted to point out how it helps fulfill the Forest Lake goals and objectives. In their strategic plan, it would be to improve the environment for new and existing businesses. 2040 comprehensive plan, it delineates and improves business districts, rehabilitate where necessary or redevelop substandard properties, encourage business owners to remodel, rehabilitate exterior facades, and increase vitality of individual businesses and commercial areas. Our business assistance policy, more the same, meets one or more goals of the city's strategic plan, and primary development is to encourage high-value commercial development. Tax increment financing district, it's been since expired, but from 2001, the whole purpose of that district was to encourage concentration of new commercial activities, provide more attractive and pleasant pedestrian environment, provide expanded utilities and public services as a means of encouraging new development growth, and provide sites to accommodate new and expanding firms in the city. So for your consideration tonight is an agreement between GLG Forest Lake Properties, $70,000 for 280 Broadway Avenue West for fulfilling their redevelopment plans. So just note that included in this plan or in this agreement does indicate that they would need to develop their property by December 31st of 2027, or the property would revert back to the city. Additionally, this will come back before the city at a later time when they have gone through their entitlement planning processes, where the city council will actually transfer the land to the EDA, and the EDA would sell it to the land or to GLG Properties. So staff does recommend, on the basis that it does conform to so many of our goals and policies, staff does recommend the EDA move to enter into contract for real property purchase and private development by and between Forest Lake Economic Development Authority and GLG Forest Lake Properties LLC, a Minnesota limited liability company. Do you have any questions for me?
Any questions for Abby? We can just open it up.
I can certainly start. Abby, was there any transfer of property rights on this property prior to today?
No, there have not been.
Okay. I did, and the reason I asked that is I did notice that over the weekend, they had signs stating that it was for customer parking only and actually had their materials on our property, our meaning the city of Forest Lake property, specifically stating prohibition for carnival attendees to park there and only limiting it to their business customers. And I was taken aback a little bit by that because it's been a long-standing place for attendees to park and certainly a value that we should have still had as a city. The second thing I want to note, and I'll reference page 44 in our packet, which is the Exhibit C. And I did speak with staff about this prior, but I wanted to make sure this was on the record. That the concept site plan does have numerous concerns. And I specifically wanted to note that it didn't have an east-west trail. That is one thing we talked about in closed session. It also does not have improved access on the south side. It still shows a dirt path there, essentially, for a vehicle. That would be something that normally would never pass through Planning Commission and Council for our standards. And then I also had clarified with staff that this would require Planning Commission and City Council approval. I did have a resident ask me that today. So those were my initial comments that I had talked about. I'm kind of torn on this, so I'm looking forward to hearing where other people are. We purchased this property for, plus the demo, for $228,446 in 2001, so about 25 years ago. It was appraised at $138 2 years ago, and they're offering us $70,000. And so we're taking essentially if you add in inflation, this is over $250,000 investment that we need to make an argument to say, is this an economic benefit to the city to have that delta between the $70,000 and what we've invested plus interest? And I'm having a hard time getting there. In closed session, one of the things we had talked about, and I know this wasn't in your staff report, you can't summarize everything we did in closed session in the next hour, but one of the components we had talked about was transferring I would say a relatively unusable piece of property that they have on the south end that would be adjacent to ours for potential trailhead. And that would have brought me to a very easy yes to say, here is where we can transfer and actually get a value from the city. Perhaps not necessarily a $250,000 value, but a much better value than this delta that we're seeing. And so I think this is a reminder to me of why the city shouldn't necessarily be in the business of buying and selling properties. And I think this is a clear example, and I'm not picking on Forest Lake, because many cities make these errors, but why we should not be doing this. Because if we had left this property in the hands of private ownership, it almost certainly would have transferred with the rest of that property, and we wouldn't have to be in this mess of subsidizing a private business. Do I think this property is best use for them? Almost certainly. Do I think it could be of other use? Absolutely. And so I was hoping that the purchaser would be here to, answer some questions and present why they see this economic value to us, because I'm having a hard time getting there.
Before we take other comments, could I just piggyback on a couple questions maybe that Member Langness raised. The site plan and some of the nuances around the unfinished access to the south, is there some discussion that is yet to be finalized, and that is there some thought that there is an opportunity for that to come back in a more finished state? Or by approving this tonight, are we essentially greenlighting that unfinished access to the south? And I guess I'm just trying to look for some degree of.
Sure. The
kind of
EDA
finishing.
is really just considering the transfer of the land for them to do the greenhouse. We wrote parking and circulation and pedestrian access areas and stormwater improvements. You're not granting site plan approval. The agreement does not constitute site plan approval. They'll have to come back before our planning commission to gain site plan approval. And then we'll actually have to transfer the land from the council to the EDA before it's finalized.
There. But in getting to this point, we haven't provided any assurances to the purchaser of not needing any amendments to.
We have
What would be our
advised them,
typical-
we've reviewed
Okay.
several renditions, but no formal submittal of a site plan has been submitted to the city. So everything has been non-binding. They are aware that we will be seeking an east-west trail connection through the property, and they've indicated that they'd be favorable to discussing easement opportunities. They also are aware that we want to see improved access to the south. But as a reminder, the city owns right-of-way through there, so we have some obligations probably in that that we'll need to work through as part of that development review process.
Fair. Open it up for other comments, thoughts on the proposal tonight?
I think the original comment that was kind of the argument back when is that piece of property has been sitting there for 20-some years off the tax rolls. It's 7,000 square feet, so it didn't really lend itself to anything else, you know, and then that's what, and the improvements that those folks have made to that piece of property from the old building on out, it just seemed like it was a good fit. And yeah, when they paid $200 and some thousand way back when, that was out of line. But that, you know, there's no question about that. And so, my mind, at least that was why I was in favor of this particular transfer, because of that. And to get this thing back on the tax rolls, and that's what it amounts to, so.
Other,
I would agree with that. When we had the first closed session, I might have missed another closed session when I wasn't in attendance, but when we first talked about this and kind of looked at valuation and the size of it and what else could be done with it, it just seemed like, you know, a good fit, and it could help finish off that West Broadway look and feel and have a nice look all the way along that corridor. But I agree with Commissioner Langness that, you know, I mean, it's an opportune time to talk with the developers about, you know, how can we kind of have a win-win situation here. They're getting a, you know, a nice value for some property that helps with their development. And then if we could also make it work for, you know, the trail system and whatnot, then we both win. That's what I'd love to see happen.
I'll chime in. I think Member Langness hit the nail right on the head at the latter part of his comments around a cautionary tale on why we shouldn't be purchasing properties in speculation of for future projects. That's what makes tonight's decision so hard, is that we have invested so much, and, you know, by today's standard, I think we would all agree that we overpaid for that purchase 20 years ago, and so the what next becomes really challenging. I'm happy to see that the purchase price has come up to, from, you know, what was originally proposed. And so is it as much as we would all like to see? No, but is it better than, you know, not being on the tax rolls and sitting with a $0 as a empty gravel lot? I think there is economic value that is created with this project. I have no doubt that that is a benefit to our downtown. The project that they're proposing will be a benefit to our downtown. That doesn't just help that site, but helps the downtown in general. Folks that come to shop there are going to spend some time probably going to lunch, probably visiting some of our other retail locations, it's just a larger retail footprint. And so I think we shouldn't be shy that there is some level of subsidy in this purchase price, but I also think that we're subsidizing retail, and retail in our downtown is one of the hardest sectors to attract. And so it's worth some level of subsidy. So we've got a already established business that has made a substantial investment already in their current footprint. They've done a lot around just kind of keeping our historic core, but also bringing those buildings up to modern standards. In a retail segment, this checks like almost every single box we would want for some sort of economic subsidy downtown. And so for that reason, I don't love the price, but I'm happy to support this tonight just because, again, it puts it back on the tax rolls. And I think the real mistake was really not so much this price tonight, but what the basis of the property is from what we purchased 20 years ago, and we just can't unwind that clock. So I would encourage us, again, and I don't think we should be shy in saying this is an economic subsidy. This is not a fair market value transaction. And to me, I can get there because, again, it's supporting a local business in a retail segment in our downtown. All of the things this body's been wanting to do for many, many years.
Is there a
Member
way
Lynch.
to legally tie them down on the trail access that they're willing to talk about in the future? Make it more part of the contract that there is going to be?
That's what I was,
That's what I-
that's what I was gonna go before she beat me
Yeah,
to it.
how locked in.
Was, are we gonna be a year down the road and we wanna do an east-west connection with the trailhead, and we go to them and they say, sure, 25,000,
Abby,
50,000?
what are our options to be able to kind of preserve that ability?
Well, the trail connection is a part of our downtown plan. As part of any site plan review process and planned unit development process, which they'll have to go through with the Planning Commission, who's the body who does the kind of meat and potatoes of development review. If their plans don't conform to the city plans, then our Planning Commission and subsequently the City Council, who reviews the planned unit development, can deny their development plans. If they don't gain development plan approval or their entitlements and develop the property by December 31st of 27, then the property reverts back to us. We purposefully left it vague in the EDA's documents because the EDA isn't the body that reviews the site plan. We didn't want to get into kind of some of those very particular details in case things need to shift around some. That's why we really tied it to a high-level concept plan. The words pedestrian amenities are in here specifically. They are aware that that trail connection is something we're going to be seeking.
Abby hasn't specifically mentioned these words, but I would put out there that it would, if that is something that this body feels strongly about, and if we are considering approving the agreement this evening, there could be two motions made. One would be to motion to approve the agreement, and then the second would be a motion of recommendation to both the Planning Commission and the City Council, just making it on record that that is the wish of this body. I do appreciate that in putting this together, we don't want to commit ourselves too much into what is going to be a Planning Commission consideration, and so I can appreciate there is that fine line. But if there's components of that future transaction that this body wants to be memorialized, it's, I think, appropriate to make that as part of a second motion. And again, it's just the recommendation to Planning Commission and the City Council, just so that that's known.
Thank you. I would love to see that happen, because that was my wondering how we connect with the other committee then, you know, our conversations with another group that we don't necessarily sit down and plan together. Yeah.
Yeah, but your staff
Thank
does,
you.
and we will convey
Yeah,
that. I mean, you want to make a formal motion, that's certainly more in the record and it's clear, but we'll still carry that message through to the Planning Commission and City Council.
That's a good idea.
Any other thoughts or considerations before we consider a motion, if anyone's ready for a motion? Not hearing anything, I think we're ready for a motion if anyone's ready.
Okay, hang on. Based on our discussions from previous closed sessions and the concerns that we've had, and I'll make a motion that we proceed with the sale as we talked about for the $70,000.
There is,
And then the second motion would be with the caveats.
maybe let's take this in two separate actions. Maybe first action, if you're okay with that, Councilmember Husnick, or Member Husnick, is for the approval of the 280 Broadway West contract for real property purchase and private development. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
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 Oppose?
Aye.
One oppose? Motion carries. I would do a follow-up motion, which would just be to put on the record that the EDA recommends to both the Planning Commission and to City Council that future planned unit development with the 280 Broadway Avenue West project include trail access, as has been discussed.
President Bain, could I make the motion with some additional wording?
Yes, love that.
If that would
Thank
be
you.
okay?
I retract my motion. Let's just start from scratch.
Okay. I would make a motion that the EDA recommend to Planning Commission and City Council to maintain the long-term east-west trail connection in our 2040 comprehensive plan, and with regard to the south access, either improvement or removal to our city standards.
I think well stated. I would second that motion. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? Motion carries. All right, we are going to move on to item number 7, which is the 2025 budget recommendation. And Abby.
Just trying to get Commissioner Langness' notes to a T, so.
I have it written for you. I can give it to you later.
I'm sure we have people that help us with our minutes, but I always like to try to give them a little heads up beforehand. At the EDA's last regularly scheduled meeting in July, the EDA requested additional information about the proposed 2025 budget. Enclosed is some information that summarizes not only the proposed budget, the EDA's proposed budget, but also projects you've been involved in through different types of planning processes, and how those are moving forward in the city's 2025 budget and our 10-year capital improvement process. So I included in there, again, the original proposal that was submitted to you last week, Economic Development Fund proposal. There's a 24.27% increase proposed. It's directly proportional to staff wages for the addition of the potential addition of a planning manager that would help assist the EDA, help me help you. But then some of the other line items that I note in here, what exactly they are: operations, operating supplies, including our website, theinvestinforestlake.com, seminars, training, dues and subscriptions, legal expenses. Contracted services are the funds that we provide to the chamber for our BR&E program. Planning, that is to help cover costs associated with your work plan. So as a reminder, in 2025, the work plan includes developing policies related to the local affordable housing aid, Headwaters 123 consensus building and requests for proposals, as well as any sort of downtown priorities and implementation. I didn't break these out specifically to allow the EDA some of that funding or that flexibility that we need as timing sometimes goes along. We're well out on, any sort of process of what we know we need to do for Headwaters 23 and what kind of funding we might need associated with that. And then just program funds, that's that commercial incentive improvement program. Every year we take $50,000 and we kind of just hold it available for businesses to improve the exterior of their facades. So then I include in here just some information about the budget and the capital improvement plan. So the City Council did discuss priorities for their 2025, and a lot of the things the EDA has been working on rose to the top. Prioritize 10-year staffing plan, prioritize projects in the 10-year plan, city aesthetics, the downtown plan, and the shoreline plan, and then downtown redevelopment and dedicated funds. Based on that information, there's a series of projects that I include in here that have been proposed for this as part of this year's budget and the capital improvement planning process. I'm not going to go into a crazy amount of details and dollars, but I'll just let you know that includes Broadway Avenue gateway landscaping. So that's like re-landscaping the Broadway Avenue roundabout, the medians along Broadway Avenue. The Veterans Memorial. It's currently being designed by the Veterans Memorial Committee. They received a significant injection of funding from the state in the last year, so they can spend that through 2027. However, that project would, it's anticipated that that project would occur the late 25, early 26, Memorial Day dedication 26. Shoreline enhancements, that would be to rehabilitate the Lakeside Memorial Park shoreline. Staff has proposed that to be in 2026, as well as either boat launch relocation or boat launch rehabilitation. So I'll note on that ramp relocation, that $1.06 was a part of your downtown studies that we've been looking at. The boat launch rehabilitation of $500,000 is a guess. No matter what we do with the boat launch, we will be seeking outside funding sources. We have a meeting later this week with the DNR to start these conversations about what we're going to do with the boat launch in the long run. It'd be anticipated that too would occur in 2026, the idea being if we're going to be tearing up some of Lakeside Memorial Park, end of 25, 26 with the memorial, it may end up being that we have a construction year that year. Again, these are long-term plans to just get them in front of the council to say, these are your priorities. You said you want to do them. Let's get them into our improvement plan. So I didn't know exactly what the EDA wanted in terms of more information, but I hoped that identifying some of these downtown plan projects were things that just helped provide you with more information you were seeking and a greater comfort level in making your recommendation on the 25 budget. Now, that being said, since maybe since the EDA packet release, one of our city councilors, former EDA member, did ask about banners. So last year, the replacement of the banners had come up. Mm-hmm. It was removed from the city council's general fund budget. Staff has estimated that if we were going to replace all the banners with a new design, it's probably going to be about $15,000. There are some recommendations on the design that right now the banners themselves, because they're rectangle, they really act as the bad sail. You know, the way they're really catching the wind and getting torn up. Whereas those that are in the triangular shape tend to hold up a little bit better. So that would be the only recommendation from our public works staff, that if we're going to go down that road, that we might consider a completely different shape. And if we're going to consider a different shape, a whole new design might be in order. Now, that's not included in here. It wasn't included in your work plan. The EDA certainly has a fund balance, or else we could anticipate that as part of your projects funding. I think that $25,000, $22,500 in our planning services. But that was up for the EDA's discussion as well. So I recommend you review the proposed expenditures for 25, and if favorable, move to submit the proposed budget to the City Council, requesting a 24.27 EDA levy increase to accommodate the proposed expenses.
Thank you, Abby. EDA, let's just open it up. This is our second discussion on this topic, so happy to jump in wherever anybody is as far as thoughts. Abby, thanks for pulling together the additional detail that is helpful.
I appreciate breaking it down a little bit more so we have a better understanding of where things are going. I appreciate your time on that.
How much does this affect our overall levy? You know, just a 10-year plan alone, we're probably looking at about a 15%?
I don't have that information on me.
But it must,
It's a great question for City Interim Administrator Hant. I'm not sure.
We don't have all that information pulled together yet. Well, we'll know better by next week, but yeah.
But just as a reminder, Commissioner Husnick or Councilmember Husnick, and it's hard to know sometimes, this is your proposal. Ultimately, the council has
I'm not
the,
arguing that.
Yeah.
It's just, so, when we add something to it,
yep,
we have to be conscious of what's going on there, so. That's why I asked the question.
yeah.
And it's a big percentage at 24%, but it's what, $40,000? Less than $40,000. So in a $12 million budget, it's, less than a half a
No, no,
percent.
it's just
So
that-
just to give you perspective though, so of where
There's
it
just
might
other
fit in.
things that come along too that are
Yeah.
gonna be added to that too, that we gotta look at, so. Pretty soon, those little items add up in a hurry, so. I'm not arguing with any of the reason for this, it's just that we gotta be conscious of that, so.
Maybe, were you gonna say something?
Finish his thought.
I was just going to chime in, just for some additional perspective on, so the thoughts that I'm carrying into so we have a city council workshop topic on this exact topic this evening, specific to capital plan for 2025 and 2026. So I appreciate I appreciate that we have placeholders in place for the boat launch, and we have a placeholder in place for looking at the shoreline for Lakeside Memorial Park. I am not yet convinced that the initial placeholder dollar amounts as proposed are what's needed and that the timing is right for those. I just want to learn more about what is it about the boat launch that is, and I understand this is, I believe, a pretty preliminary high-level estimate, but $500,000 for a boat launch is a lot, and then what's proposed also on the shoreline is a lot, and so there's just, I agree that both of those topics needed some near-term attention. The timing on how that fits with all other projects, I'm just having a little bit of a hard time getting to that number at that time. But I also know that it's a little bit of chicken and egg and that these are very preliminary estimates. I just want to, I guess, raise the red flag that I have concern on those dollar amounts. And I think sometimes we just need to start saying those things out loud if that's the concern. There's a lot of details to come, but those are some thoughts that I'm kind of wanted to share tonight with this group, and then also we'll be carrying into our council discussion this evening as well. Go ahead, Member Lanus.
President Bain, I share those same concerns with you. And to alleviate myself on that, the requested action is to only review the proposed expenditures for 2025, which I was quite comfortable with at the last meeting, but absolutely 2026's long-term thoughts is a whole nother deal and probably needs significant more conversation.
Agree.
I had a question. In one of our meetings a while back, and I'm sorry, I have missed a few meetings due to some family obligations, but we had talked about some other things in terms of, and I don't know, I'm trying to kind of skim through this to see if they're in there, but maybe it's just not in the detail that you covered or in the summary. But like lights for the pickleball courts, and we talked about some of the things that we, in terms of like voice from residents, things that we felt would bring some value to the residents, and, in our SWOT analysis that we had gone through, some of those things that came up, and did those land in here?
I'd have to go, so they're not in your budget. The EDA doesn't, you don't get involved in necessarily the actual capital improvements associated with the programs that are going to benefit the community, right? Sometimes, some of the, something like banners, it's kind of it's an aesthetic thing, it's a draw, but oftentimes that's going into a whole nother budget line item.
Okay.
So things from our SWOT analysis, we narrowed it down and then developed a work plan that really called out the next couple of years. Pickleball courts isn't in your work plan because we've got other bodies that are looking into that sort of stuff. We will continue to do quarterly work plan reviews, so we'll take a look at that. This year, I think in our work plan was to look at our policies and procedures, some policy development stuff, to do a planning study on that southwest quadrant of the city where we've got some residential growth right on the edge of that area. don't remember them all off the top of my head. Next year, Headwaters 123 was a big one. So a lot more of that physical development and growth than some of the other items, but I'd happily provide that for you.
Yeah, I was just, to kind of circle back in the work that we've been doing, I like to close the loop on things. That's just how my brain works. So, if that SWOT analysis, and I thought it was a really, great use of our time, and if some of it, it was great work, so if some of it and the things that floated to the top is top priority that we had all agreed on, if some of them, of those things don't belong to this committee and they belong to another committee, myself, I like to say, okay, this doesn't belong to us, but you as a staff member are going to bring that to the committee it does belong to, and then I know that's being taken care of by the proper committee.
Sure.
So if somebody asks, what happened to that? I'm like, you know what? That's with them. They got it. And, and that we've got the ones that we're responsible for, because we've already vetted everything, we've done the work, we've done the SWOT analysis, and we're hearing people, and we're bringing it, and we're representing. And so that's the way I feel. So that's just me. I like to see that it's captured, and then what are we doing with it? So it doesn't, for maybe some future, I'd love to revisit what were the action items. I mean, we kind of knew what the action items were, but then, where do they go, and then what do we take next from that? Because I thought it was a great exercise.
Okay. Member Lurch.
Last month you brought before us the local affordable housing aid program. I just want to make sure that when we're talking about our budget, there wouldn't be any administrative costs being asked of the EDA. Okay, that's all I'm wondering.
Other questions or thoughts about the budget? So I also appreciate Commissioner Langness's comments around the concerns specifically around the shoreline study and boat launch are 2026 planned items, and so certainly not part of capital planning for 2025. But also, I also think if there's some concern, we should probably start raising that sooner rather than later. So
Radar.
keep it on radar. And it has been a big part of what we've talked about in this body as part of the downtown plan and what's next for the downtown plan. So kind of we knew that funding for those projects was going to be challenging, and so this is where kind of that rubber starts to meet the road, and we need to start, identifying and scoping some of those projects. So I'm, again, glad they're on radar, and there's just some more work to be done there. Anything else specific to 2025, though, since that is the requested action, is to make the recommendation to council for a budget approval? Any other points of comment? Anyone ready for a motion?
Motion to approve as recommended by staff.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose? And our motion's approved. All right, next on the agenda is the Headwaters 123 update.
Thank you, Mayor Bain, President Bain, members of the EDA. The last meeting, I advised you we did not submit a response for a request for inquiries released by deed for the Headwaters 123 site. It was largely due to staff's inability to confirm electrical capacity. There are other factors that went into that decision, and you can see in my staff report that there was some other constraints, including the potential moderate industrial zoning, hazardous material processing on site. In addition to that, regardless of that, I think one of the biggest challenges for staff right now is that we don't have a good record of the information that the EDA might have had in the past about the site. So we're taking this opportunity we think that there's quite a bit of opportunity to pull our partners together to discuss the opportunities of Headwaters 123. Inquiry was made about the number of RFIs the city's received and how many of them staff have responded to. In the last 2 years that I've been here, we've received 7 RFIs. We received an additional one today. That additional one was for a property about at least, I think, 130 or 150 acres in size, much larger than our property. But there are some primary constraints that are coming up in these RFIs. The proposed property uses A number of companies, including the Project Maxwell, are seeking industrial property to allow for manufacturing. And it's not maybe the best fit for the business park zoning district. Purpose was to reserve for multi-use buildings, offices, wholesale showrooms, light manufacturing, research and development. Manufacturing is permitted use in the zoning district, but many of the RFIs suggest manufacturing would be heavier in nature. And then also requires some buffer from residential properties. Additionally, the site size becomes quite constraining. Rarely the city is receiving RFIs for properties this size. There's two properties that I noted in my staff report. Each were seeking 100 and 300 acres respectively. More often than not, projects are seeking 10 to 50 acres. And a lot of them want a pad-ready site. And so it's just making our site a little less desirable to be responding, or make sense for us to spend time to respond for these. So I know there was concern of me not submitting for Project Maxwell. But like I said, we definitely view this as an opportunity to reestablish some of that baseline information we have, and then also strengthen those connections with development partners. Christine and I met with Chris last week. We're reaching out again to Connexus. Just for frame of reference, our government relations representative at both Connexus and Xcel Energy have changed in the last year, maybe 18 months. So some of this information is new to them as well. So we want to get our site back in front of them and really start looking at what all of our partners can provide and help guide us in the development of this. So. Over the next couple of months, we'll be pulling this data together so that we have better information on the sites. But then that's going to just tee us up for that 2025 work plan discussion, addressing that SWOT analysis that Commissioner Grindal was mentioning. Hitting Headwaters hard was one of the things that this body wanted to do. And so the idea being we have all the baseline information for us to really start having those discussions between the EDA and the council in early 2025. What do we want to do? How do we want to maybe keep moving forward with Headwaters 123? So I provided this as an FYI. There's no action needed at this time, but I'm happy to answer any questions the EDA might have.
EDA, go ahead,
Okay.
Member Lodge.
Question for Chris from Washington County. Data centers, what's the latest? Why? And the technology corridor.
Yep. Thank you, President Bain, Mr. Lurch. So there are no shortages of inquiries for data centers. Minnesota is not quite up to some of the other states that we're competing against. Des Moines, for example, has 5 data centers. If you get over into Virginia, some of the East Coast communities have a number of them, just amazing amounts of data centers. What's happening more recently is, and I don't think it's going to go away, I think the demand for data centers is going to continue to grow as AI continues to grow. AI is not going to go away. It's here. Cell phones are not going to go away. They're here. Every time you pull out your cell phone, that email that you send is stored at a data center. Every video you watch is stored at a data center. So we want to be poised for those types of opportunities. And the cool thing about a data center is it's not going to be producing smoke or noise. It's a very high-scale, very high-tech building, maybe not necessarily with hundreds of jobs, but there might be 50 jobs in there that are making $150,000 to $200,000 a year to keep those computers running. So they're really good jobs. And they're going to need a spot. The most recent one that chose Minnesota is Meta, and that they chose Rosemont for a very large data center. Prior to that, Google was looking at Becker. So they're still in the market. They're still looking at us, and we just want to be ready so that if we do get that right opportunity, we can say, hey, would you look at us? Would you consider us? And know that we own 123 acres of land, and it doesn't necessarily need to be the full 123 acres. It could be, it could be 5 acres. It could be 20 acres, whatever the case might be. There's a data center in downtown Duluth. People wouldn't even know it. It's in an old hardware building. So it doesn't have to be a large building. It doesn't have to be 123 acres. It could be something as small as 2 acres. But just to be ready for it. I know there was some discussion about the availability of electricity, and that's not right now is something that we can easily get our arms around. Right now, if somebody asked for 25 megawatts at that site, it's not available. But could we get there? Absolutely. And the one thing to keep in mind about Conexus Energy, and I'm not an expert in how electricity moves, but Conexus does not own the transmission lines, they own the distribution lines. So they need an Excel or Great River Energy to get the power to their substation, and then they can distribute it to that site. So it's gonna take a partnership, and all of those parties wanna sell power. And what we want is the high-tax, high-wage property values to go up in that area. And so we're looking at technology jobs. And you know, it might not be somebody that produces, I'll just use electric vehicle batteries, for example. That might not be what you're looking for. But would we do something with programmers that need to program those cars, or using AI or something like that to put a building in that location and to be able to track them? Absolutely, all day long. And so we're going to continue to work with the partners, as Abby mentioned, and it's kind of a chicken or an egg. They haven't rolled out the power just quite yet to the site, but there's power to the site. It's just not 25 megawatts. But could that happen over a phased-in period? Yeah, it can. And could it also happen while the building is being built? Absolutely. It's going to take 18 months for somebody to put a building up, and so could Conexus and Excel provide power in 18 months? Probably. It's just not there today. It's kind of the chicken or the egg. And they're looking at it, right now it's just vacant land, so they're not going to run the utilities out to serve that site when there's nobody there to use them. But if somebody comes to the table and says, hey, we're interested, they're going to move pretty quickly. They want to sell power, and we want the jobs. So hope that answered your question about data centers. And
We were worried when we heard 18 months from the power, thinking it was a real turnoff for the whole idea was data centers for that corridor.
yeah,
So
and
if you think 18 months is reasonable for planning
and
and building.
it's a really good question, but it's not usually, I haven't seen where they need 25 megawatts today. Usually it's a phased-in approach where they're going to need 5 to start with, and then they might get to 15, and they might need 20, and then 25, but over time. But eventually they're going to maybe need 25, but it usually doesn't happen all at the same time, unless it's a big one like Meta or Google. And then you can bet that Excel or Conexus and Great River Energy are going to roll out the red carpet
We'll jump.
to get something like that here.
I was gonna say, do you know what the specs were for those in Rosemont and, where did you, and Becker?
And that's what happened down in Des Moines. It was, was Apple or Google or Microsoft or one of the first ones went in and said, we're choosing Des Moines, and then all of a sudden the rest, all 5 of the others just chose Des Moines. So once we get a Meta here or a Google here, they're looking at us. It's just, how do we land it, and how do we work with our partners to get the utilities to the site?
Thank
Did
you.
that help?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions or thoughts on this topic?
That answered a lot of questions.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're ready for our next, we're going to move into updates, city updates. Abby, you want to start?
Sure. I included in my in the packet just a quarterly development update, kind of giving you the heads up of the activities that are happening around the city. You'll continue to see these every 3 months. So we'll kind of just keep this in here and keep it revolving for you. If you have any questions, I'm happy to address them. We do have a closed session, so maybe if you have questions, we chat about it, and I'm happy to bring back answers at the next meeting unless there were any pressing things.
Any pressing questions or any follow-ups? Abby's update. Go ahead, please.
For updates, I've got 2 questions. One is on the local affordable housing aid. Where do we stand on that? I did get, thank you for the guidelines. I read through them. It was very informative and answered a lot of questions. Just wondering, you brought it to the EDA last month.
Yep.
Is there anything we should be discussing, or did the city take it over? Or?
At the moment, no. We are waiting to have that same conversation with our planning commission before having it with the city council. Our first disbursement won't happen until later this month, and we have 3 years to spend it. So our work plan doesn't actually call for us to really start talking about and help developing some policies or programs right away. So I think a work plan review is up in our next meeting, so we can kind of look at when that'll end up being.
So what group is deciding how that money gets spent? Who gets that money?
Oh.
I'm just out of curiosity.
Ultimately, I think it'll be up to the city council, and I don't doubt that there might be some sort of joint work session. I think I heard from this body that, any aid in all of those areas is a needed thing. We'll talk with the Planning Commission about that as well, and then bringing that to the council with maybe a little bit more detailed information about some of those partners that we might be able to work with. We're still also waiting on the county to see how they're going to be using their funds. Ultimately, I think it'd be our hope that we can piggyback into county programs. Doesn't put too much of a strain on city services. But so we're just kind of, Planning Commission next. Unfortunately, they've had like canceled meetings here and there, and we'll be in front of them at the end of July, and then we'll go to the council. So it won't be until this fall that that'll come back for discussion.
Okay. I know there was some, I had questions about especially administering it, but if anybody has not seen the guidelines, Abby's got them, she can send them to you. And it sounds like a really good deal that we could use the money. It was a lot more flexible than I thought it would be. But my concern was, how do you decide where it goes? The other question is, where do we stand on the city administrator?
That's a great question, and maybe defer to President Bain on that one.
Yeah, I can give a quick update. So council met in a special meeting last Monday, I believe, yes, last Monday on the 1st, to consider our next steps. Many of you participated in our community review panel, and as part of that process, Joga had kind of come out as a top contender, a top, I would say maybe finalist out of that process. Unfortunately, he has resigned, or he has removed himself from that process. And so council in our meeting on Monday instructed our city attorney to put together a work plan and bring some recommendations for a more targeted search vendor that we might use. Being rather vague just because we haven't seen what that plan might look like. Council will be talking through what those options are in our second meeting in July. And so I would expect more detail to come at that point. Really, our meeting on Monday was intended to be a second interview with Mr. Gah. Unfortunately, prior to that, he withdrew from the process. So really Monday was us sitting around the table, kind of asking ourselves, now what? And giving some instruction to Amanda to look for a more targeted vendor to do a more specific search. Also on council's, just to kind of close the loop, on council's agenda this evening is consideration of a kind of a settlement agreement with EDA, just kind of paying them for a portion of their contract for what was committed, and it is expected we will be parting ways once we, if council approves that agreement this evening. Happy to answer any other questions on that topic, but I don't have a lot of specificity again until council meets again to talk about what other service providers might look like.
The only other update I have was just a follow-up from an inquiry at the last meeting, what the area median income is. Forest Lake's area median income is $91,157. I believe that is for a family of 4. Washington County's is $110,828. That is up 8% from the year prior. I can email out that information if anybody would like that.
Okay, moving on with updates. I know we still have a closed session here, so I want to make sure we have time. Chris Singh.
Thank you. I was going to say Mayor, but President Bain, I did notice in the last minutes of the EDA, there was discussion about the local affordable housing aid program and administration of it. And the CDA, just let you know, is geared up, and we have the policies in place. We're gearing up with staff to be able to administer those programs. If the cities choose to work with us, you certainly have that flexibility, and we will absolutely work with you to deliver that money in any way that you'd like. So just wanted to reassure you that you don't have to go it alone. We're here to help, and whatever we can do, please let us know.
Very good.
I don't have any other formal updates. Thank you.
Thank you. And Chamber, Nanette.
Thank you, President and members of the EDA. We are in a busy season, and so I thought I'd just share some of the things that are coming at you or that maybe you've heard about. First, we have we are actually doing grand openings for 3 new businesses on Thursday, so that's always exciting. 3 in 1 week is good. And then we have our community street dance, which is on July 20th. And so fast and furious on that. Let's see, we also have our Chamber Golf event, which is a big fundraiser for our Chamber of Commerce, and so that's 2 days after the street dance. We're also working in partnership with the Forest Lake Area Schools and Chris at Washington County CDA on the Career Launch Summit, so very excited about that at the end of August, and making tracks with that as well. Some of you may have been invited today. I think the invite went out today. And then also in August, we welcome all the new teachers to the area. So that event is a big opportunity for Leela and the Forest Lake Area Schools. And so we welcome all those teachers. And then already working ahead with Abby and the City of Forest Lake on the hometown holiday celebration in December. So it's been... Plus, I think we talked last time about budgets and bylaws, so we've just finished all that up as well. So it's been a little hectic. Any questions?
Any questions? All right, that being the end of our planned agenda or planned updates, I would move that the EDA move into a closed session pursuant to Minnesota Statutes 13D05, subdivision 3C3 to develop or consider offers or counteroffers for the purchase or sale, Lot 1, Block 2, Deponti First Addition, and Lot 1, Block 1, Deponti Third Addition, Washington County, Minnesota. Is there a second to move us into closed session?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Oppose? We're in closed session. This is the last item on our agenda. At the end of our closed session, we will come back into this room just to reopen the meeting to adjourn.